now, and that is what's going on with the Ukraine. There's so much information, misinformation, disinformation. What is really going on? Are they getting armed guards to grab people, take them out? Where do you want? Let's start with the Zelensky and the Ukraine. What can we get into that?
Yeah, I mean, oh my gosh, as you said, there's so much. So we just wrapped up our final episode is coming out next week of this 11-part series that we've done on Zelensky. It's called Zelensky Unmasked. We're taking a look at Ukraine and the war there, and just what a disaster it is, right? It's the whole thing is a scam. It's probably the biggest scam that's ever been run in terms of dollars in foreign policy. And I know that's a tall order because obviously Afghanistan was in the trillions of dollars. I mean, in terms of the full time, but we're talking about 20 years. And Ukraine challenges the amount of money we spent on Afghanistan in just 2 years. It's unbelievable the amount of money that's going there. But it's so much more than just the war itself, right? It's who's getting rich. It's what that country is becoming. Under Zelensky, the whole idea, what we've been told over and over again, is that, oh, this is this great democracy in Eastern Europe, and Russia wants to restart the Soviet Union, and it's laughably simple, right? Russia wants to conquer Ukraine, and then after that, they're going to march into the rest of Eastern Europe. They're going to take Poland. They're going to take Georgia. It's all ridiculous. Ridiculous. None of that's happening. And instead, what is actually happening is that you have this clown show in the form of, and imagine this, guys. Imagine you just select somebody to be the president of a country who has no experience and has no idea what he's doing. He's an actor, right? He was most famous for playing the piano with his penis. That's what the guy was most famous for in Ukraine before this. They create a television show called The Servant of the People, and he's the actor who's in it. And as the actor in this show, he literally goes and he's a teacher who rants on camera. He gets seen, and then overnight he becomes a sensation. He gets elected president, becomes the president of Ukraine, cleans up corruption. 2 years after this show becomes a huge hit on this oligarch Kolomoisky's network in Ukraine, Zelensky and Kolomoisky together create a political party called the Servant of the People Party. And then Zelensky then runs in 2019 for president under that party and wins, and doesn't just win, he wins a landslide victory. And people have asked me before, do you think it was all a setup? No, I mean, set up in terms of like a clean election. I think it was a clean election. They didn't have to cheat, right? Because you're duping the entire population with this idea. This guy's going to come in. Most interesting about Zelensky winning in 2019 was this. When the guy ran, he ran as a pro-peace candidate. Because remember, what nobody was going to tell you in media here is that there was a civil war going on since 2014. Ever since the U.S. overthrew the government of Ukraine in 2014, there's been a civil war going on in the Donbas region, which is that eastern section of Ukraine that borders Russia. People who are native Russian speakers identify as Russian, but they live in Ukraine, being killed by people who identify as Ukrainians who are in Western Ukraine. And so you have this civil war that's been going on. About 40,000 people have died in that civil war since 2014. And when Zelensky gets elected, he's elected on the platform of two things. I'm going to root out corruption, which Ukraine, nobody will admit to anymore, right? But everyone knew before this war started was the most corrupt country in the world. And then secondly, he was going to bring an end to that civil war and peace. He was going to have peace talks with Russia, and they were going to bring an end to the civil war in the Donbass. Well, he doesn't do either one of those things.
Any of that.
Right? Corruption stays. Any of it. Any of it. Corruption stays the same. Zelensky, before the war started, was down in the 20th percentile in terms of popularity. No one liked the guy. And then all of a sudden, Russia crosses the border because we provoked them to, right? How do we do that? We send, by the way, no one's playing this clip anymore, but Kamala Harris going to Ukraine. And what does she do when she gets there? Literally says, Ukraine must join NATO now. That was the red line. Russia said they can't join NATO. And we have the vice president of the United States saying, bring them into NATO. So sure enough, Russia goes in there, bring troops in. They start this special military operation, they call it. And it's not really a war because they're not actually trying to conquer Ukraine, right? They're not trying to. This is not like Saddam Hussein trying to take Kuwait back in 1991. They're going in there. They're taking those regions, but then they keep stopping. They don't march to Kiev to take the capital. And so then Zelensky puts on a costume, this green uniform that he wears all the time, and the guy marches around like he's shooting up TRT or steroids or something, right? But he's getting bigger all the time and doing press conferences, and he walks around in this costume, and he gets hundreds of billions of dollars flowing from all over the world, which he's funneling out of the country, or it's going to his friends, and they just keep this war going. And now we're, what, 2.5 years into this freaking war, and there's no military left in Ukraine. They've got teenagers fighting. They're drafting guys between the ages of 15 and 65 because there's no one to fight. And as you mentioned here in the lead up, they have conscription officers walking around the streets of Ukraine looking for men who are not out there fighting, and they grab them off the streets, throw them in a van, and they take them to go fight in the front lines. If that were happening in the United States, people would lose their minds. Imagine we're driving around in San Francisco and you're like, hey, there's an eligible, there's that guy who's got purple hair, grab him. And you put him in a truck and you say, you're going to go fight? Like, we'd lose our minds over here.
It's incredible. It's incredible. It's insane. And, you talk about Russia. They lost so many people in World War II. And there was an old saying, if you see an old man in Russia, like, good luck. They were all killed off, that generation. Now they've done that to Russia. I mean, to Ukraine.
Yeah.
What do you think is the goal then? We've seen all this stuff about BlackRock coming in, buying up all the land. The newest thing I heard is that BlackRock is trying to pass legislation in Ukraine that they can't bury their dead on their land. Like, I just heard that story, which is insane. So, we obviously know they want them to come into NATO, but what do you think is the end game for this whole thing through the Zelensky? Is he just going to go until they grab him and hang him, or what do you think happens?
No, I think Zelensky. First of all, I think the end game for Zelensky is all based upon what happens in November, right? Already before Kamala took over for Biden, and they sent him off to the beach to go lay in the sun until his term's over. Zelensky was already starting to have peace talks again, right? Because he knows it's coming to an end. If Trump gets in, he's done. So he's trying to navigate that. But the fact is this, Zelensky's term's up. Like, he has a 5-year term. It expired earlier this year. So he's actually not even supposed to be in office. And so he's done. He's got hundreds of billions of dollars that have been stashed away and hidden away. So he's fine. He'll leave the country, probably end up in the UK, where he has a lot of property in London. And he'll end up somewhere over there. And then as for what happens ultimately with like BlackRock. So this last episode that we're going to release next week, you guys need to watch it, because if you really want to understand like what ultimately happens to Ukraine has been defeated. They lost the war, but they actually didn't lose to Russia. They lost to BlackRock. They lost to multinational corporations who, what they did was they managed to conquer the entire country of Ukraine without firing a single bullet. What they did was they went in and said, we're going to make you loans. We're going to fund this war. We're going to protect you. Well, they didn't protect them, and they gave them loans. And now remember the whole controversy with the IMF and Argentina, right? For years now, people have talked about the fact that Argentina is such a mess. They're the biggest indebted country in the world to the IMF, International Monetary Fund. The people of Argentina, basically it's their labor and their children and their children's children who are paying off this debt forever. Before the war started, Argentina was obviously the world's most indebted country. Ukraine passed them in the first year. The first year of the war became more indebted. And who are they indebted to? They're indebted to the IMF. They're indebted to actual multinationals like BlackRock. BlackRock has already been tapped to run the rebuilding fund for Ukraine. So they are basically taking all this money that's been given by governments around the world, and it comes under, it's not controlled by the Ukrainian government. It's not controlled by Zelensky. It's controlled by BlackRock, who will then distribute it and use it how they want to. They basically own the entire country. That's the end game.
It's so crazy. To a war that they can't win, to try to destroy their morale. Is there any chance that this is being done in the Ukraine?
Because with Russia, you mean?
Yeah, with Russia, that we keep hearing that like World War III is coming and all that stuff. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think there are multiple different groups that have their own agendas. So BlackRock has their agenda, right? The military contractors who have now, secured, they basically gave away all of the US weapons. So now they get to spend the next 10 years selling us new weapons to ourselves, because we don't have any weapons left because we gave them all away. right? So everybody has their own reasons, but I do believe there are some within NATO and some of these governmental organizations that do actually want a hot war. I think that's what they actually want. I think that they're not opposed to the idea of a nuclear war.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's very crazy to me, and because war is money. I mean, we do another show called Cash Daddies. We keep waiting for World War III to destroy the economy. Nope, everything's ticking up again because everyone gets excited about war, and it just makes me really sad. Like I believe in capitalism, but when you have an economy that's based off of war, drugs, and sick people, you really got to wonder what kind of economy you have. Uh,
Mhm.
it's really crazy to me. Now, is there any thoughts on what Putin like? Has he kind of been hesitant? Has he been a cool head in this whole thing, knowing that, we're gonna get into Israel? I feel like there's a lot of countries that Israel's been provoking
Mhm.
that haven't wanted to get into this war because they know we'll pop off World War III. Do you have any opinions on like Putin and his kind of hesitancy to get a full on war going on with the West?
Well, I think he's been extremely reserved. I mean, the fact is that Putin could have ended this war in a very short amount of time. I was told two things. When we were doing this series, we interviewed a number of kind of U.S. military officials who have contacts in Russia and said, "What is happening? Like, explain to us the strategy." Because some people in Russia are angry with Putin because they haven't gone in there and just flattened Ukraine, right? And what I was told was this: number one, they said Putin doesn't want to govern Ukraine. So he could have gone in and taken the whole country, and NATO wouldn't have been able to stop him in time, and they could have done it with no problem. If you look at the disparity in terms of the weaponry, the tanks, the army, it's not even close. However, he doesn't want to run Ukraine. He doesn't want to govern Ukraine, right? You would spend years having like little insurgencies and groups fighting. Like, he doesn't want to do all that. But the other thing he doesn't want to do, and I think that as Americans, we have a hard time understanding this because of the way America goes to war. And that is that what he was able to do was say, I don't want to go in and like carpet bomb and flatten Western Ukraine. I don't want to flatten Eastern Ukraine, right? So he was very methodical in terms of how do we take land, how do we take areas without destroying all the infrastructure, without destroying the homes. As one guy put it to me, he said, you got to remember there are homes in Eastern Ukraine that are 300 years old. Buildings that people live in still today. They're 300 years old, right? That's older than our entire nation is. And he says, and people still live in these homes. What do you do if you go in and you just bomb all this out? Right? There's nothing left. And what do you do then? You create a migrant crisis. And so what Putin has done is the opposite of what we do everywhere we go. We go into Syria and we flatten everything.
Yeah,
Say, oh, we're going to take out ISIS. And then what we do is we go in there and we flatten everything. And then we create a migrant crisis because nobody can live there. So they all end up in
100%.
Germany. Right?
Yep.
We do it in Iraq. We do it in Afghanistan. We do it in Libya. We did it in Syria. We did it in Yemen. We create migrant crises by destroying what's there, and then people can't stay and have to go. And that's by design as well. Putin's not part of that design. He's not part of that new world order that's attempting to redesign the map of the world by destroying these parts of the world so that you force migrants into Western Europe and you force them into Eastern Europe. He's not doing that. And that's why I think Americans have a hard time understanding his military method.
And we also Americans have a hard time realizing that the being able to separate the U.S. military industrial complex with America, and what that military industrial complex has done to the rest of the world. I constantly get in fights with people. They all want to be like Russia, boogeyman, bad guy, and I go, who's invaded more countries since? And they just don't have answers, and it makes me really sad. Have you done any research into the next gen weaponry that they're using in the Ukraine? We see little clips here and there of insane drone strikes, people trying to run, people trying to surrender, and these drones just taking them out. And again, you start to get into there's something called Greater Israel. That's a project that a lot of people talk about. But the next gen weaponry, they've kind of turned the Ukraine into kind of a testing ground. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't know much about that, except to say it wouldn't surprise me at all. I mean, why wouldn't you, if you're going to test weaponry, why wouldn't you test it on a battlefield like that? Why wouldn't you test it in these locations? I know that every time there is a military offensive that comes out of Ukraine, it is some kind of weaponry that the US has secretly handed to them, or the UK has secretly handed to them and said, use it, but we can't, there's plausible deniability. We pretend that we didn't give it to you and that we don't know how you're using it. But in a lot of these cases, it has to be used by Americans or British troops who have to actually, what's the word, but utilize it, right? They can't utilize it on their own. You can't just hand them these weapons and say, you guys do it. You have to be specially trained. So we know that some of these weapons that have been used and some of the attacks that have happened have to be US military that's doing them on Ukrainian soil. And in some cases against, in like areas like Crimea, where you know the media tells us all the time, well, Crimea belongs to Ukraine, Russia stole it, those are Ukrainians, that's Ukrainian land. Well, then why is Ukraine bombing them? Yeah. If those are Ukrainians, why are you bombing your own people? It doesn't make any sense at all.
It just constantly seems like poking the bear all the time. And it's just to draw, again, Russia into wars. And again, all this stuff seems to be so, everything seems to be an astroturf to movement, meaning that, you know, this migrant situation isn't done on accident. It's not, or excuse me, it's not naturally happening. You're bombing the shit out of these people. You're incentivizing them with all this kind of money, housing, you know, and they get here and it just seems like they're trying to create a power keg. And you have people like George Soros just straight up like showing his plans, including his like forced migration. Yet he's allowed to walk the earth. It's like he's allowed to walk freely through all these countries. It's kind of crazy, right?
Well, it is crazy. And again, if you think about what has happened with these migrants, right? So the US is experiencing for the first time. We've obviously had, you know, border issues for a long time. What's happened under the Biden administration, Biden-Harris administration for the last 3.5 years, right, is significant in terms of the number of people. We're talking about in the last 2.5 years, 3.5 years, almost 12 to 15 million people who have come into this country in that amount of time, right? We're talking about more people have come in than the population of like 12 different states. Yeah. So it's crazy when you think about the number of people and the fact that there's no place to put them. Well, Europe, you have to think about Europe, Western Europe especially, if we're talking about Germany and France and Spain and Portugal, Italy. That is like a smaller version of the United States. So when you have a migrant crisis in Germany, it's like having a migrant crisis not in the United States. It's like having a migrant crisis in Florida, right? If you have a migrant crisis in France, that's like having a migrant crisis in Texas. Right. So you have what's been happening in Europe though almost was like the testing ground. We destroy these areas. We fund groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda so that they create havoc in these places like Libya, right? We kill Gaddafi and then we watch the place just descend into chaos. And then we watch migrants flee. And when they flee, what happens? And it's like a test. What happens in these places? If you've been to Europe, I don't know if you guys have been to Europe anytime in the last couple of years.
Johnny was just there.
Mm-hmm. Where were you?
I was in Paris and London and then around different parts of France.
Okay. So Paris, you see it a lot, right? You see a lot of migrants in Paris. Now, you're not going to see them
swarmed. Yeah. The trains, especially. Yeah.
Yeah, especially the trains, right? Because they're basically moving from one outskirts suburb to the other. That's how they're traveling. They're not really they keep them mostly out of the center of Paris, like the tourist areas. But if you're in these suburbs, right, they're basically run by different gangs of migrants from different countries. Well, it's not that they're all these terrible people. It's think about the chaos you're creating. So what you're doing is you're taking people from one country, right? Let's say Syria, and you send a bunch of young men because you're not going to probably travel with a lot of babies and women, right? That's not who's traveling to these places. It's very, very difficult to travel. It's mostly young men. So they leave, they go to these countries. And then when you get there, you don't speak the language. You can't work. Nobody wants to hire you. So what do? Well, you form like street gangs and you control neighborhoods. And then you have organized crime. But then in other suburbs, you have people from Somalia, and then you have people from Yemen. And so you get these people from all these different places. They're going to do what people naturally do. You herd together, and then you protect each other, and then you're kind of at war with everyone else. And you create commerce. And the way you create commerce when you don't speak the language and you don't know how to be in that country is you commit crimes, right? And that's what they do. And when we were in a couple of years ago, we went to Greece, we went to Italy, we went to Spain, and we went to France. And the common thing you saw in every one of these places were not from the same places, but groups of men from different countries congregating in these places. And what do? You go to Greece. If you ever go to Greece, it's really interesting. You get all these guys from Africa, right, who were there, and they're Black African. They speak some English, very, very little. And you know what they do all day long? They make, or they have shipped over to them, these cheap little bracelets. And they get up in the morning and they're in large groups traveling together, and they're just trying to force tourists to buy bracelets from them. And it's the same stinking bracelets. And is it because they're bad people? No, it's because you're creating chaos by dropping these guys in this place, and they have to find a way to survive. And so this is all by design. And now we're watching it happen in the United States for the first time. We've had, again, people from Latin America, South America, Mexico who have been in this country, come across the border illegally. That's been a common thing for many decades. But we don't have that anymore. You go to the southern border. I grew up in El Paso. That's my hometown. You go to El Paso today, you go to the airport. The airport is lined with people sleeping on the floor, and they're
It's
not
crazy.
None of them are from South America, and none of them are from Latin America or Mexico. They're from China. They're from Africa. They're from the Middle East. They're from Russia, and they're just laying on the floor with a Ziploc bag with a cell phone in it and a free plane ticket to go anywhere in the country they want to go. It's total insanity.
And how did they get there? Because my thing is like how did it, was it on a boat, like from like, because I understand how Mexicans get here. I understand how my people got, like, they literally, it's not that far. But if you're from the Middle East, how did you get to the south of the border? Why not go in through New York too, though?
So the reason they don't go into New York is because what they're doing is they're whether they're Chinese, whether they're coming from the Middle East. So narco groups, the narco cartels in Mexico are organizing it, right? Then groups that are criminal groups in these different countries, or in some cases government groups, like in Venezuela, the government says we want to get all these guys out of prison. They're literally opening the prisons. What they do is they send them all to Panama, because Panama is the central location for land to then walk up to the southern border. So they send them to Panama. Panama becomes the location where all the ships go. The ships drop them there, and then the cartels will march them up through Mexico, well, through Guatemala, and then up into Mexico, and then to the southern border, because they know that they can just cross there. If you go to the Canadian border, it's much more difficult to cross.
How crazy is that?
The southern border, you just walk across and give yourself up, and they bust you away.
But when you mean the cartel, I think not that you're wrong, but I think you're meaning more like the Chinese government, right? Because does the cartel really care if there's people at the border? You don't think it's like the same people that gave the cartel the ingredients to make fentanyl? It's who gave them those ingredients, who gave them the recipe for the cartel to make fentanyl.
So the Mexican cartels are making more money smuggling humans right now than they are drugs in the United States.
And if you
it's like $6,000 a person.
Wow.
So okay, and you might say like, okay, because I do know this for sure. I do know that when you cross the border and you can't afford it, you still pay for it by labor. So is that what you mean? As in, maybe if you can't afford it because you're in the you live
no,
in the...
dude, no, like literally, like they get a stipend, they get all this stuff from these globalist organizations and the U.S. government, which puts money in his pocket, and these guys got to pay it out. And
you pay in order to go. You don't get to march up through Mexico. You don't get to march up through Mexico to the border unless you've paid. So when we say they're being trafficked, people think they make their own way, that they're making their own way. They're not making their own way. That's why they're bringing them to these centralized locations, and then they start them marching in big groups. But you don't just jump in the group and like, hey, I'm going to the United States. And then what you do is you move that way. They take you all the way to the border, and then you've already paid, and they get you across the border. That's the deal. And then you go across.
And what do you believe is the purpose of this? Why are they flooding these? I mean, I have my own beliefs, but what does Ben Swann think is the purpose of this forced migration, this mass forced migration?
So again, I have come to believe over decades doing this kind of stuff, right? It is never one thing, right? The mistake that we make in truth communities is that, and I think this is the disinformation that comes from government sides, right? Is they want to plant the idea that there's one narrative, there's one purpose, and there's one group behind it. It's never that. It's groups that have their own agendas, that have a similar agenda. They have their own desired outcomes, and so they work together, but they get to their own desired outcome. So I think it's multiple things. I think there are governments around the world who say we want to send our worst people to the United States. Venezuela, El Salvador, they're taking violent criminals and saying we're going to empty out our prisons. The crime rate in those countries is plummeting. And then they're sending these guys, these Venezuelan guys who end up like the girl who, that 12-year-old girl who was raped and murdered in Houston, right? The two guys both crossed in El Paso, not together, by the way. They came over like 2 months apart, didn't even know each other. Both ended up in Houston, got together in Houston, and then they found this 12-year-old girl and they brutally raped her and murdered her, left her body in a park there. There have been multiple cases where you have these women who are attacked and raped by these men from Venezuela. Is it because Venezuelan men are rapists? No, it's because you're taking rapists out of Venezuelan prisons and you're sending them to the United States, and you're taking the worst people there and you're sending them here. So governments like in El Salvador and Venezuela want to rid their population of these people, so they're sending them here. Governments like China, I think there's a very different reason why they're doing it. I think Chinese are doing it because I think that my personal belief is the Chinese are setting up sleeper cells. Chinese don't do anything without having a clear plan in place, right? And I believe that's what they're doing, that they're sending military-aged men to this country. They're distributing them in lots of places, and I don't think, maybe we'll never know why they're here because they won't ever have to be used. But I think they're being planted here and placed here so that if there is a war, or if there's a conflict with China, they literally are sending an army into our country and positioning them in different locations. I think there are groups in the Middle East that are NGOs that are sending Middle Eastern people here for the same reason they sent them to Europe, to sow chaos. So I think there's lots of different groups who are doing it for their own reasons. It's just that they all have the same agenda, which is we want to have our own outcome, and they see that it's all funneled through the same funnel, if that makes sense.
Yes. Do you have a pressure from above, pressure from below? Because at the end of the day, what the establishment and the oligarchies or the elites, whatever you want to call them, really want is martial law. Once you get the martial law, once you get the continuance of government, you can throw out the Constitution that has all these rights that we have, Second Amendment, First Amendment, and you can just do martial law, which is lock down everybody, cause complete and utter chaos, and then be problem, reaction, solution. It seems to be, we for me personally, if you're asking me, we're in the Chinese Cultural War meets the Russian Bolshevik Revolution. Each place, China, Russia, Germany, they do a little different version based on what they want out of that country and based on what that country has. And I think they've done like a kind of a hybrid between those two, where we just, we have people flooding the country to destabilize. And then we have like the youth trying to just push agendas that are completely and utterly chaos. 90 genders, cat litters in bathrooms, whatever the thing is. And it's all meant to cause anxiety to the point where people will beg for them to be saved. We don't care because people want to believe that safety is more important than freedom. And when you do that, you end up losing both.
For sure. But I think there's something else there too, which is there's something else nefarious happening. And I'm curious what you guys think about this. But this is not my theory, right? There are people like Brett Weinstein and others who have pointed this out, and I think they're right. And it's very scary. And that is the idea that you have, during COVID, you had a purge of law enforcement and military in this country, and specifically in the military. The COVID was used as a way of saying we're looking for obedience above everything else, above patriotism, above love of country, above love of community, above the idea of duty. We want obedience. So if we tell you to inject yourself with this poison, you do it no matter what, right? And so we saw this massive purge take place in the military in the last couple of years. There are already bills that are being designed right now that say one thing we should do with all these immigrants who are coming here is they need something to do. We should put them all in the military. Well, that's disastrous, because what you're doing is you're displacing a patriotic military with foreigners who don't know anything about your country. So they're not raised with the idea. You know, it's interesting. The guy from Telegram who just got arrested, right?
Yeah.
Pavel Durov.
Yeah.
And he finally got released just today, I think. But so Durov gets arrested, and you hear a lot of commentators who were talking about, oh, well, you got to understand the reason for this is because, Americans have this misnomer about free speech, right? We think that free speech is like this universal principle. It's not a universal principle. In fact, if you go to France, they don't have free speech in their constitution. There is no right or freedom of speech inside the French constitution. Germany does not have it in their constitution. No European nation, in fact, the UK does not have it. No European nation has enshrined a right to speech. Only the United States in all the world has this right enshrined into our Constitution. And so when you have that, you have this concept as an American of, well, I believe certain things are true and according to our Constitution, unalienable, right? My right to speech, my right to bear arms, my right to have bodily autonomy, my right to face a jury of my peers if I'm arrested, all those things. And if you insert an entire population that is from outside this country into your military, what rights do they believe in? What rights do they believe that they're upholding? Or do they just believe that they're supposed to do whatever they're told to do? Because that's the actual world they come out of. We're talking about the chaos that's created when people from other cultures and beliefs are dropped into a foreign society. And that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, when your loyalty is to the person signing your paycheck and not to the actual principles of the Constitution you've sworn to defend, that's a real problem. When they're the guys.
That is a real problem. And what happens with these illegals when they turn off the money? You're in these hotels, you're getting your stipend, you're getting your food, and then all of a sudden it stops. Chaos, dude. And just like we saw with all the BLM riots, where they had just giant stacks of bricks showing up out of nowhere. All these bricks just showed up out of nowhere. I think you're going to see that happen with guns next. And, we're entering September. We're 2 months out from the election.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to get super interesting from here. Super interesting. Ben, again, I brought up earlier, you did a wonderful, wonderful piece on all the things that don't make sense about October 7th. All the times that Israel could have done something to try to stop it and they ignored it. Where do you want to start on that? I would love to hear, you talk about that amazing video you put out.
Yeah, thank you. And let me just say, if people have seen that video, they should go back to Truth in Media, because there's been about 4 or 5 others since then where we touch on other areas as well. But yeah, let's start with that. So the reality is this, that when we talk about Hamas and Israel, when you talk about October 7th, you're just not hearing any real accurate information from American media about this. It's very controlled. The reality is that you would think that Hamas led this attack and somehow Israel missed it. And oh my gosh, it's the worst attack that's ever taken place. And thousands of people died and they took hostages back and they're still holding hostages. And how could this happen? And we've got to stop Hamas. And then when you start doing any kind of research at all, and by the way, all of our research comes from Israeli media. Like, we don't speculate about anything in this stuff. It's all stuff that's been reported in Israeli media. We're just piecing it together in a way that others have not. But the reality is what you find out is that Israel knew almost 2 years before what was going to happen, because they managed through spies to steal the blueprints to this attack. They knew it was going to happen. They knew when it was going to happen. They knew exactly what was going to take place. And by the way Hamas carried out this attack was kind of ridiculous. Like, they had paratroopers with big fans on. They're flying across the border. They're storming in on motorcycles. It's like, this
at
is
a music
not very
festival.
hard. Was that
at a music festival, like the most random thing?
Yeah, exactly. And here they go, and they're headed in, and like they managed to do it. And the Israeli military had no idea this was going to happen. Well, what we find out is when you start looking at it is, well, actually, not only do they know what was going to happen, they knew it was going to happen with the paragliders. They knew it was going to happen with motorcycles. They knew exactly how it was going to take place. And not only do they know it was going to happen, and not only had they prepared for it, right, for almost 2 years, but then the people who were living in those kibbutz communities right across from Gaza could literally see Hamas doing training exercises, practicing it, doing dry runs for months, 6 months before. People living in those kibbutz communities were telling the IDF, we know what they're going to do because we can see them practicing. We can see them practicing kidnapping Israeli soldiers and bringing them back into Gaza. We can see them practicing with paragliders. We can see them practicing with their motorcycles. The Israeli government not only told people, this is not happening, you're fine, they banned the average Israeli citizen from using radios to listen to the radio traffic from across the border. They made it illegal to do that. Then when October 7th is about to happen, you mentioned the music festival. Well, there were actually 2 music festivals. There was the one that was approved beforehand on October 5th and 6th. And then at the last minute, with about 30 days before this happened, they approved a last minute festival on October 7th. And that's the Nova Festival that ultimately got attacked. Well, the head of the IDF along that strip of the border with Gaza denied it originally, said, no, you can't have this festival. There's no time to prepare for it. And it's over a religious holiday. And so we're going to have fewer soldiers around. And apparently there was unusual pressure coming from the highest levels of the Israeli government saying, no, you need to approve this festival. Approve it. Then not only do they approve the festival, but they take the soldiers who were in this area, about 100 of them, and they move them away from the border to the other side of the country, not a few miles down the road. They move them to the other side of the country where there's no evidence of Hamas at all. And mind you, Hamas is every day practicing on the border with Israel, practicing these dry runs. Why would you move them? The Israeli government still never had any explanation as to why these guys were moved. So you see that happening. Then we have an additional story, by the way, after that, where we explain that not only did all of that happen, but once the attack began, which began around 6 a.m. and Hamas comes over, it took Israeli soldiers anywhere from 6 to 12 hours to respond while people are being killed in these communities. And they didn't show up. There was it appears, some kind of stand down order, not allowing Israeli military to engage, even to show up in these communities. And there's reports from Israeli soldiers who, by the way, went against the orders they were being given to stand down and just went. And this one guy, we have a quote from him where he says, basically, they were driving there, he and his unit, and they were expecting to see the roads full of soldiers headed south. And he says there was no one there. It was completely empty. There was no one on their way, no one coming to rescue these people. And when they got to these different kibbutz communities, they would sit outside the communities and people inside are yelling, please come inside, they're killing us. And they stood down for another 4 to 6 hours outside these community walls and did not go inside. So I think for Americans, it's tough because we have such a narrative that we've been told about Israel and about Hamas and about the Palestinians. And then when you start to look at what actually happened, you're like, shit, this is crazy. Did Israeli government allow this to happen to justify going in there and wiping out the population of Gaza? Is that actually what this is? Because everything that we have found so far points to exactly that being the case.
Well, I mean, it sounded so much like 9/11 to me, so much like that. I like even down to when the U.S. government takes an anti-terrorist force and sends them to California on 9/11. It's the exact same thing. People going, jet fighters going, is this real? Is this fake? What's going on right now? Yeah, it's super interesting because it goes, did they have a plan? They got intel from Egypt a year before that this was going to happen. And it just seems
30 days before, the prime minister of Egypt calls Netanyahu personally and said, we are hearing that Hamas is going to do something terrible. And they said, no, it's fine. Nothing's going to happen.
It's so crazy.
But you had the blueprints, so you already knew it was going to happen.
You already knew it was going to happen, and you let it happen. And Israel has a whole history of that. So then all of a sudden, the Hamas is in. They're hang gliding. They're using Vespas. They got Vespas. They're attacking on Vespas. It's chaos. And what does Israel do? The mass Hannibal directive. Right. And that's what people don't ever want to talk about. It's like, and it's like instantaneous. You could not. I mean, the time between the attack versus the media push is almost instantaneous on everything. And the narrative is that either the first narrative is they couldn't get there in time, right? IDF couldn't get there in time. Well, what people don't realize is Israel is about the size of Orange County or LA to San Diego. It takes 2 hours to get down to San Diego.
It's the same size as the state of New Jersey.
Yeah, it doesn't take like 12 hours to get across in any way. No. And now if you're doing helicopters, I'm sure that's 15 to 20 minutes at the most. And then the narrative just so there's this famous story about how, about how Israel doesn't negotiate for hostages.
Right.
So instead of negotiating, their whole directive is kill everybody all the time. And
kill the hostages.
Yeah, kill all the hostages, kill everybody, light up everybody. And what we've seen with these hostages, they've all come out and said, we weren't raped, we weren't sexually assaulted, we weren't beat up, and all of our bruises are coming from the attacks from the IDF. And the IDF starts to lose, and Israel starts to lose the story because they're interviewing people, and Israeli newspapers are doing better work than American newspapers. Calling out the injustice, and they're like, yeah, we just shelled this. We don't know who was in there. We just shelled this building. We just shelled that building. Not even trying to extract anybody, just killing everybody inside there. And you have these hostages talking, oh, they're going to kill us. They even waving to them that they're Israeli, them getting shot at. It's absolutely chaos.
It's very controversial because when you bring up the Hannibal Directive, as you mentioned, most Americans have never even heard of it, have no idea what it is. Social media censors will tell you it doesn't exist, and they'll strike your page for even putting it up, right? Even mentioning it, because they say it doesn't exist. It's a conspiracy theory. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's written about in Israeli documents all the time. And listen, I'm not even sure, and this might be controversial, I'm not even sure I disagree with the concept, right? The concept is, if your enemy goes over and they take hostages, especially military hostages, take hostages back, and then they're trading, 2 soldiers for 1,200 prisoners, and their directive is we can't let them get hostages. So if they take a soldier, shoot him along with them. I'm not even sure I totally disagree with it. It's controversial, but if a member of your military gets taken, if they understand this is the consequence for being taken, is we can't negotiate because we've got to take them out. That's one thing. Here's the problem, is that it's not a Hannibal Directive if the hostages were taken because you allowed the hostages to be taken.
Yeah, right.
It's not a Hannibal Directive if you say, we're going to open the door and let you into this community. We're going to sit outside the community and refuse to come in for 12 hours. Some of these soldiers who were supposed to be deployed were less than 10 miles away. Yeah. And it took them 12 hours to show up. Yeah. Like, what are you doing for 12 hours? So while all this stuff's going on, then when you finally show up and you go inside, it's like, it's a mass Hannibal, take them all out. Now that's a problem, right? Yeah. Because number one, these are not military targets who were taken. These are civilians who were taken. They're civilians who were reportedly taken, it appears from all the evidence, because you knew they were going to get taken, you allowed them to be taken, and now you're killing them. And more than that, let's say that you even don't have, because I know some people out there would say, I don't have a problem with that. And I know there are a lot of pro-Israeli people who will comment on my pages and say, I don't have a problem with that. Okay, so you don't have a problem with that. Here's the issue. If you don't have a problem with it, then at least admit that's what you did. But they're not even admitting that's what they did. Every single Israeli who's dead, we see their pictures on our news, and we say, this is what Hamas did. These are the people Hamas killed. These are the line of cars, 50 cars on a roadway that have been like vaporized, right? They're all melted now because Hamas did this in paragliders. How do they do this on paraglider, right? They're dropping jet fuel down and setting all these cars on fire? Or is this a Hellfire missile that Israel fires onto its own population and kills them? So my problem is this: if you back the Hannibal Directive, if you think it's okay or you think it's moral and you think there's a justification for it, then at least be honest enough to say, I'm okay with doing that, and that's what happened. Yeah, Hamas didn't kill all these people. Israel killed all these people to prevent Hamas from taking hostages. But see, the problem that we have with when you talk about Israel is you can't talk about either one. You can't say there's a Hannibal Directive. You can't say this is what they're doing, and then you can't say, oh yeah, and Hamas didn't kill all these people. So what we're living in instead is this upside down world where Hamas came over, Israel didn't know it was coming. They've killed everyone. All the damage, all the death, all the carnage is the result of Hamas. So it justifies us going and now murdering 30,000 children in Gaza, right? That's where, to me, you lose the whole thing. If you want to believe in this stuff and you think it's okay because Israel has a right to defend themselves, then think it. But at least be honest about what Israel's doing.
Do you think it's blown up in their face? Do you think Israel overplayed their hand?
Oh, for
Do you
sure.
think I mean, I'm hearing stories that their economy is on the verge of collapse. People are fleeing the country.
Yeah.
Businesses are filing for bankruptcy. All these countries that they rely on energy for are just boycotting them. Especially, I forget the country that sends them their coal, which is their major energy provider, is no longer sending them coal. What do you think the future looks like for Israel?
So the problem is this, that when you're losing, and they are losing, right? All right, on an international scale, you're losing. Why? Because you're exterminating the population of Gaza.
Yeah,
right?
human beings.
Yeah, these are not, and by the way, we just released a piece yesterday, which I encourage people to watch. If you know, and I'm sure most of your listeners are not going to be big pro-Israeli people. I'm just guessing. You don't have a lot of Zionists in your crowd, but if you know someone who is, send them the piece that we just did, because one of the things that you also have to remember is that Hamas does not exist without Israel. Israel created Hamas. Now, they didn't originally create them, but Hamas was a very small radical group in the 80s. And what Israel was really afraid of was the secular PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, a name we haven't heard since Bill Clinton, right? And so you had this group, the PLO, and Israel said, listen, we got to get rid of these guys because they're getting too much international sympathy. How do we do that? Well, there's this group over there called Hamas, who are a bunch of radicals who are going around and they're shanking Palestinian men who are secular men in the streets. They're killing them in the streets. So let's give those guys money, because the enemy of our enemy is our friend, right? And so how do we keep chaos over there? How do we prevent a one-state solution inside of Gaza, the West Bank and Gaza being opposite ends? And up until even last year, Israel sends hundreds of millions of dollars a year in cash, U.S. cash, into Gaza and into the West Bank, and they fund Hamas. They wanted Hamas to take over because they also wanted a radical enemy they could eventually eliminate, because the Palestinian Liberation Organization was not that radical enemy. It was a secularized group that said, hey, you got to stop leaving us in an open air prison. So just a little commercial there. So I encourage people to watch that too, because that's another part of the story that's very important. The problem is this. Now you've tried to label, this has been Israel's plan for a long time, label everyone who lives in Gaza, everyone who lives in the West Bank, to be a part of Hamas. Men, women, children, doesn't matter. So then you just go over there, and the end goal for Israel, in their mind, their end goal, I'm convinced, is there will be no West Bank, there will be no Gaza, there will not be a two-state solution, there's a one-state solution, and that one state is Israel's going to take it all, right? What we're going to do is we're going to kill as many people as we need to kill, and then we're going to force other countries to take refugees. So they're reversing the refugee thing. We're going to leave so much carnage, so much disaster here. We're going to force refugees into Egypt, and we're going to force them into these other places. The problem...
Okay, go on. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say the problem that they're going to have is that in order to repair their reputation, you can't be fighting against women and children and people who are completely defenseless, because the fact is it's like shooting fish in a barrel. These people can't fight you. It isn't a war. It's genocide, right? They don't have the ability to fight IDF soldiers. You have people in Israel who are cheering for the idea that Israeli soldiers should have the right to rape Palestinian women when they're in these fights. And by the way, the polls are something like 70% of Israelis say, yes, it's fine, right? If you want to rape these women. It's crazy.
Or rape guys. Like they're taking that guy around. He's doing a press tour. The guy who openly admits he led an IDF rape gang in prison. You see it on video. Now he's doing like a tour, like he's got a special coming out or something, and he's promoting it. And I'm like, what are the optics of this? I don't understand how anyone's okay with it.
Right. Well, the reason people are okay with it is because no one's talking about it. If you turn on your TV, no one's talking about it. Right. The only thing you hear about Israel is Israel today, had a further push into Gaza and took out Hamas militants. That's all you're hearing. You're not hearing any of this other stuff. You're not allowed to hear any of it. So the only way you fix this problem, if you're Israel, is you have to expand the war into a wider war. right? Because you can't only be fighting against Palestinian children and women. And so the way you have to do it is you have to bring Lebanon into it. You have to bring Iran into it. You have to expand it into a wider war so that you can say, see, no, we're not just fighting against defenseless people. We're shooting them like fish in a barrel. No, we're actually fighting against, Hezbollah. We're fighting against Iran and drag other countries into this conflict. So unfortunately, I think that's what Israel's doing now to try to repair their reputation, is we can cover up some of what's happened here if we can bring larger groups in and force a wider war. And in a wider war, you're able to kind of diffuse and hide what's happened. And you also force other countries to pick a side. You can't keep boycotting us if we're all in a wider war. You got to pick a side. And obviously the United States is with us. So are you going to be against the US and NATO and Western Europe? Or are you going to be on our side? So I think that's kind of their end game and how they get themselves out of it. But that's bad for the rest of the world.
Yeah, out of it, they get themselves out of it, put everybody in it.
And yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. You said, I'll just steal that from you next time.
So basically, I think every one of these countries know that if they retaliate really hard, even Iran, that World War III breaks out. And that's why Israel keeps poking the bear. And your explanation is wonderful. That's why they got to do it. They have to get out from slaughtering women and children. They have to bring in other countries. Now, you always hear the discussion, why doesn't anyone take the Palestinians? Well,
Right.
for me, I think everybody knows, especially Egypt, that if they take these Palestinians, Gaza is gone forever. They'll
Yep.
never get it back. And what happens now, and I have my own theories on this. Who created Israel? We can get into the history of that. But these people are very famous for controlling trade routes, and they have a giant plan to put a giant canal goes right down the middle of Gaza, and this will completely screw Egypt, because Egypt has the Suez Canal, which is goes one way for about 12 hours, then another way for the next one. Israel wants to put in a canal that goes both ways, which would streamline the whole process and just cripple Egypt's economy. All that's gone. That seemed to be a big reason why nobody wants to take Israel's take the Palestinians. Is there a scenario you see where Israel doesn't come out of this intact?
Intact meaning
Still a country, still
no way. I mean, Israel, there's no way Israel doesn't come out as not a country. The question will be, is Israel all of it at the end, or does Palestine, Gaza, West Bank, does that still exist? I think that's the real question, is will that exist at the end of this? Because that's Netanyahu's end game. The end game is there's not going to be a West Bank, Gaza, Palestinian anything anymore. When they are done, it will be either all laid waste, and then, as you said, and you are right about that, this plan to put this canal through Gaza and to run it to the sea there, right? They already have the port that's sitting there at the end of it, to run this canal through, because what do you do with all this destroyed land? Well, maybe we just get rid of it anyways. I mean, it's terrible land and people died here, and it makes sense to clear it out. So I don't think there's any scenario where Israel is gone at the end of it. I don't think there's any scenario at this point where Palestine survives it. And the reason they won't survive it is because who's stopping Israel? No one's stopping them. Now, if Trump gets in office, does he stop it? He doesn't sound like he's going to. Sounds like he's just going to go along with Netanyahu and say, yeah, that's fine. On the other hand, I will say this. Trump has actually said more than Harris has, and more than Biden has, at least about somewhat sympathetic to the plight of the Palestinian people. In fact, there's a press conference recently where he made a comment about Palestinian children dying in front of Netanyahu, and Netanyahu gets very awkward and stiff and kind of looks away like he was shocked that he would even say it. So, but I don't see anyone in the U.S. actually doing anything to stop it, and as long as the U.S. won't stop it, who's going to? Iran's not going to stop it, because I agree with you. If Iran gets involved directly, it's World War III. Russia doesn't want that. China doesn't want that. India doesn't want that. These other nations don't want to engage in that because they know what the outcome is. The reason Americans are dumb enough to play this game is because we've been at war across the entire world for, well, directly now over 20 years of just endless war. Think about this. I mean, you guys are young guys too, right? Sitting here. Sam's not so young,
Hmm.
but you guys are young guys.
I'm dead on the inside. Go on.
But you know, I think about my kids, right? I have a daughter who's 24, a daughter who's 23, a son who's 20. They have actually never known a time when the United States was not at war. It's a nation of perpetual war. So we don't actually have a concept of what war is. We don't know what that looks like. We have no concept. When people say war, it's just like, that's why you have all these crackpots on TikTok, like doing like World War III outfit and like, this is my fit. And it's like they have no idea because they don't even know what war is. They think war is just something that happens out there over there. It hasn't come to us. And these other countries are at least wise enough to know what war looks like because they're still young enough in having had real wars that they recognize the cost of war. They see it, they've felt it. We're the ones who are foolishly dancing around like it's no big deal.
How much longer for till Gaza and Israel that the whole situation stops or ends, or however you want to say? Or we just keep funding it for?
I mean, I don't see us ending the funding. I don't see. So the thing is this: Israel is not going to stop doing what they're doing because there's no one holding them accountable. If you go on social media, and it's hard to even find images of what's happening on in Gaza right now, right? The death toll, the carnage. It's not talked about in front of us on the news. I keep pointing out because I have a TV above here. But you know, you turn on the news, it's not there. Like what stops them at this point? There's nothing that stops them from continuing to go on and on and on with this. And so unless something were to shift where suddenly there's like a huge outcry, I mean, you have a huge outcry. You had thousands of people outside the DNC protesting. Right. And I don't even necessarily agree with a lot of these people in terms of the way that they do it or a lot of their belief systems. But on this issue, I would say, yeah, I'm totally with you guys. But Democrats don't care. They literally covered their ears. Did you see the video of the Democrats leaving the convention covering their ears because people were reading the names of people who had died and they're covering their ears as they run out? That's the Democratic Party. That's the party that's the anti-war party, which they haven't been for a long time. But they don't care. Republicans are like, yay, Israel, no matter what you do.
Yeah, it's so crazy. It's so sad. It's so sad. So I want to get into the January 6th. We're hitting all the great topics here.
All the hits.
All the hits. I just feel like what they wanted to do was try to install, you know, the Department of Domestic Terrorism. I don't think it went well. I think they were trying to get the wrong side to do that. I don't think that side does that. If you say what how the left reacts to anything or how the left reacts to being told to cause chaos, they burn cities and neighborhoods. The right doesn't do that as much. Right. And I think they were trying to lead them on to do that, and it didn't happen to them to the extent they were hoping, and their desire to create the Department of Domestic Terrorism really didn't pop off like they wanted to. What are your thoughts on January 6th?
Oh, I think that's absolutely what they were doing. So I was actually there on January 6th, not inside the Capitol, to my FBI agent who's listening. But yeah, I was there outside the Capitol the entire day and into the night. And what I would say is it's not at all what it's been made out to be. Wasn't even close. This idea that people were trying to overthrow the government's like ludicrous. There were so many people, by the way, thousands, tens of thousands of people who were milling around who never even attempted to go inside the Capitol. Right? They're just out there walking around. And then there were clearly agent provocateurs in the crowd. We've done a lot of work on this subject. And the fact is, you'll hear people say things like there were people who were armed there. There was no one armed. The only armed people there were undercover officers.
Yeah.
Were armed. And there was a lot of those in the crowd. There's a lot of reporting of like vans filled with men, buses filled with men who were wearing Trump gear, who were busted early in the morning, like at 6 a.m. There's surveillance video of these guys getting off buses, being given like orders before they dispersed into the crowd. There was a lot of that going on. But the reality is, yes, this was all set up to be we are going to create a Office of Domestic Terrorism, and we're going to create a Domestic Patriot Act, because the narrative, you got to look at the narrative that was created around it. The narrative was, white supremacy and white supremacists are the biggest threat that our nation faces. And then you say, well, who are white supremacists? Well, basically, they were just saying white people, right? Because basically anyone who's conservative and white is considered a white supremacist. And then it's like, okay, and these people, if they go to church, or if they're in a PTA, or if they own a gun, right? If they vote Republican, if they wear a MAGA hat, right? And they have this crazy set of criteria. And the goal was to say, we're going to kind of flesh these people out. We're going to find them. We're going to monitor them, and we're going to create a new set of rules that restricts their ability to speak, their ability to travel around the country, their ability to post on social media, their ability to be banked. I mean, they were literally creating this system, and somewhere along the way, it fell apart a little bit. I'm not exactly sure why that is. I still don't know what caused them to get off this track. Now, listen, the J6 stuff is still happening. Over 1,500 people have been arrested, which is insane. They're still arresting people right now. And there are still people who are being held in solitary confinement and in jail right now who have still never had a trial. And you got to think this was almost 3.5 years ago, and they still haven't had trials. So, and the ones who have, it's always trespassing. That's ultimately what they get charged with, is trespassing or disturbing an official proceeding. Right? None of them have been charged with sedition. None of them have been charged with treason. None of them have been charged with trying to overthrow the government. So it's kind of a crazy thing. We're actually working on a film that's going to come out probably around October, and I think it's a pretty important film. It's kind of tells the story of J6 through a almost completely unknown story of one woman who died that day, and what happened to her, how she died, the cover-up that was associated with her death, the glorification of the officers who were responsible for killing her, and then ultimately the men who tried to save her life that day, who were unsuccessful, what has happened to them since. And I think in a lot of ways, this story is a microcosm story of the entire J6 narrative. That there is one thing that actually happened, and it's completely opposite the narrative you've been told. And so in order to sell the narrative, we have to destroy this truth.
We saw that with they brought in the head of ABC to help sculpt the narrative, and then all the doctored videos, and nobody cared. Nobody seemed to care. They brought in the guy who ran the Michigan governor kidnapping event. They brought him in, like, hey, dude, great job with that. Here, come over here. You're getting a promotion. Just think about that. It's like so crazy to me that this is the world we live in, and that they're just slowly trying to chip away at this kind of on our freedoms. And like, there are people that weren't even in there that are getting arrested for some unknown reason. I don't even understand why some get arrested, some don't. I was blessed. My children were 6. And I'm like, yeah, I need to stay home. So I didn't go because I knew it was going to be a bad idea. And it's just people's lives been devastated. I mean, we see the conditions, and that's ultimately what they want. Once you get labeled a domestic terrorist, your constitutional rights go out the door. And they can label you that for any reason. And now you're done.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then I don't know if you guys saw Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, came out the other day and held a news conference saying, just warning people in advance that any attempts to overthrow this election, right, are going to be met with the full force of the Department of Justice and the FBI. And it's like, well, what does that mean?
What does
that mean? If you question it? Does it mean that if you disagree? Does it mean if you protest? I'm not talking about going into the Capitol. I'm just talking about any protest at all. Like, what is allowed and what is not allowed? Because it's almost as if they're saying, if you disagree with the outcome of the election, you're a domestic terrorist and we'll come get you.
Well, I mean, if there was ever a civil war, I think anybody that's on that list is going to get arrested or checked up on real fast.
I just like this Civil War thing makes me laugh. I mean, the only thing I think that could fit a civil war is Americans versus illegals. That's the only civil war that could possibly happen, because it's not going to be right versus left. What's it going to be? A bunch of ex-Marines versus Starbucks baristas? I mean, it just makes no sense to me. It makes no sense to me. But like everything seems to be an illusion. Like I don't know how deep you go into that, Ben. You seem to be a normal human being. You have a hope in your eyes. But like some of this stuff gets into like sorcery for me. Like this manipulation of an illusion, this manipulation of energy to get in to kind of just for us to manifest whatever they want from us. And this Kamala Harris election to me, or you know, her running for president, is by far the craziest thing I've ever seen in my life. Because the people on the left who are the quote unquote the smart ones, right? I mean, excuse me, the intelligence one. They're all highly educated. They're just buying this whole thing hook, line, and sinker. They're so worried about democracy, but they just realize there was no democratic process to this whole thing. What are your thoughts on that?
They don't care. It's
So
I
crazy
think I agree with you. It is the craziest thing when you think about it. We've done a lot of stuff on this in the last few weeks, but the fact that the Democrats set this thing up pretty masterfully. You got to give them credit here. You had a president who was completely senile for 3.5 years. Everyone was saying he was senile on the right. Then we're being told through the media and through his press secretary. Remember, just before the debate, they started using a new term, cheap fakes, right? That all the videos were cheap fakes because his press secretary and the messaging team around the president weren't let in on the secret that he's about to get dropped, right? So they're trying to run cover for him. Oh, these are cheap fakes. These things aren't real. He's fine. There's something wrong with him. Then he goes into this debate, which was held, by the way, the earliest any debate's ever been held in the history of this country. We've never had a presidential debate held in June. We do not hold them not only in June, but we never hold them before the conventions when we actually have decided who the nominees are going to be. You don't have two non-nominees debate each other, but we literally did. And so when you have these two non-nominees debating each other, of course, Biden, does exactly what everyone knew he would do. He just blanks out and can't talk because this is where he is. And then by the time that it's over, every pundit who's on TV, who's like a Democratic pundit on their respective cable news shows, is like, I've been getting texts all throughout the night from different leaders in the party and different governors who are telling me like Biden's done. They're very concerned. They're very concerned. And it was like, it's all orchestrated.
So scripted.
It's all scripted. It's like, oh my gosh, no one had any idea until he debated and couldn't talk. Like the fact that the Easter Bunny was leading him around when he's at the Easter thing and he can't find his way off stage. That's all fake. But then we saw him debate and we were like, oh, he really is. There's something wrong with him. We had no idea. And so then we see that happen. Then they obviously say, well, before the convention, we're going to force him out. They force him out. And then they just take Harris and just dropped her in, which, by the way, I don't believe it was supposed to be Harris. Now, my conspiracy theory here is it was supposed to be Michelle Obama, that Obama set all this up and it was supposed to be Michelle. And the reason it wasn't supposed to be Harris is because everyone knows Harris is a clown. She has no record that she can run on. She was a candidate in 2020. She got less than 2% of the vote. Her policy positions, because she laid them all out in 2020, terrible. Remember, this is the candidate who wanted in fracking, wanted only EV vehicles by the year 2050, wanted to ban all gas vehicles. She's the one that Tulsi Gabbard laid waste to her during one debate, ended her presidential run because she brought up her history of locking up death row inmates and then lying about evidence about them. And so do you have this candidate? She wasn't supposed to be the one because she's a clown. And so Obama had it set up, I believe, that Michelle was supposed to step in and she was supposed to take over and they were going to have this brokered convention and everyone was going to pick her. By the way, that actually was the smart move. That's who they should have gone with. They should have gone with Michelle Obama. And the reason why is because whether you like Michelle Obama or you think she's a man or whatever people think about her, the reality is she has no record to attack. So
You're
she's
so right.
Whatever she wants to be. Obama's the master of this because that's what he did when he ran. He had no record. He got to be whatever he wanted to be, hope and change, right? And that's what Michelle Obama could have been. The problem was the Clintons hate the Obamas because the Clintons feel that Hillary got screwed in 2008, and she did, because Obama jumped the line. He wasn't supposed to go. She was supposed to have it in 2008, and he jumped the line and he beat her after Massachusetts. So they don't like them. So immediately when it looked like Biden was going out, who was the first politicians to endorse Kamala? Was the Clintons. So Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton come out and say, Kamala Harris, she's the one, we're behind her. And they start pushing. And they were the ones who kind of inserted and then started bringing others on board to say, hey, we got to get behind Kamala. She's the one. And it was just to screw over Barack and keep Michelle Obama from getting to have it. So now here we are. And what the fascinating thing is, yes, there's this big bump and people, oh, Kamala Harris, look, everyone loves her. I think she'll fall apart so fast. And the reason for that is because she can't talk about anything.
Yes.
This is literally, I saw a hilarious Babylon Bee thing today, but it's rooted in truth. Her first sit-down interview, she's done none. Her first interview, she's going to have Tim Walz beside her.
Yeah.
And the Babylon Bee headline was, strong, independent, fierce woman needs a man to sit beside her in case she gets any tough questions.
Dude, that is so funny. I don't always agree with the Babylon Bee, but that was fire, dude.
I think
That
you're right
is
about
so-
the Michelle Obama thing, because there was this underreported story around then that she had some personal falling out with the Biden family that or right around that time that she would have been getting inserted. And I remember talking to Sam at the time. I was like, that's curious, right? Like maybe she's going to be the one that gets put in there. And I think it probably had something. Sam, it's a 30-second clip here. I want to show, you were talking about how the Democrats have betrayed all of their supposed principles. And there was a video that got passed around a little bit a few days ago of Gavin Newsom on panel with that one dipshit speechwriter guy, and them all just yucking it up
Pod Save America people.
Yeah. About how there was no democratic process at all to this. And this to me just shows that they've completely abandoned principles, and they don't really care about it. They think it's funny. I just want to show this briefly.
It's different.
How are you feeling about the switch?
I mean, the switch. No, we went through a very open process, and a very inclusive process. It was bottom up. I don't know if you know that. Yes, that's what I've been told to say.
Yes, it was a blitz primary, I believe. That's what they called it.
It's a very, very fast blitz.
I think it was
a blink primary, so we call that.
Oh, a 30-minute convention. Between a tweet and another tweet.
It's amazing how it happened.
Yeah, it's been amazing. But what is amazing is how unified everybody is.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that, you see him just snap right back to message, but he's like, yeah, that's what I've
They're
been
like,
told to
whoa,
say.
let's not go too crazy here. Let's not drift too much.
So
Well, you got to remember that Newsom's mad because he wanted a brokered convention because he was going to be the guy. He thought.
Yeah.
Oh,
He thought
he
it was
wants
gonna
it
come down, it was
so
gonna be-
bad.
Harris, it was going to be Newsom, it was going to be Pritzker from Illinois, it was going to be Michelle Obama, and they were going to have this exciting convention where everyone's in there like this is House of Cards, and they're all like whipping the votes and and they didn't get to have any of that because the Clintons screwed it up for everybody because they didn't want it to be Michelle Obama.
So crazy, dude.
Fascinating.
So crazy. They just infight with each other.
Mhm.
And
Because-
That's
because
crazy. That tells you how much the Clintons hate Trump. Hate the Obamas more than Trump. I thought they hated Trump a lot, but when you're willing to be like, nope, I hate the Obamas more. Let me throw in Kamala in there. Fuck it. Fuck the election. That's pretty intense.
well, she cried
political
too. 'Cause
crime
she's like,
family.
why isn't it me? I should be the next one in
Yeah.
line. Now,
Yeah.
watch what you wish for, man. I mean, I think it's all an illusion, Ben. I think they're trying to give the illusion that people are excited about her. And I'm not saying there isn't a small group, but not enough, in my humble opinion, to get close to the numbers that they're saying are out there. And it's just, again, with the internet, we remember what they did with Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton and Trump, and they lied to us up until the last day, and then bang, all of a sudden it went the other way. And I could see that happening right now. I don't understand how people are excited about anything about her. 2 months ago, she was the worst VP ever.
Yeah, they're not. But the my daughter even said to me, she's like, what is the deal with her? She's like, what's this brat girl summer thing? Like she's like, this woman's like 50 years old. Why is she calling herself a brat? It's like, I know it's totally nuts, but it's all like you said, it's all fake. It's all fake. But what they have to do is they have to create the illusion so that if they want to cheat, right? If you want to start pulling ballots out from underneath tables and doing all the stuff that you did before, you've got to create at least an image around it. Just like when Joe Biden, who nobody seemed to like, suddenly got 81 million votes, more votes than Barack Obama ever got, right? It's like, and who voted for him? Who was going out there and voting for him? So they want to do the same thing with her. I think the challenge is going to be this, that she is genuinely a dislikable person. I would say that between the two of them, Michelle Obama is much more likable in terms of her favorabilities than Harris. If you sat them both down in a room and said, I'm going to ask you policy questions, Michelle Obama can answer policy questions. Even if you disagree with her policies, she can answer them. Harris can't answer a policy question. I mean, this is a woman who sat in front of Lester Holt and cackles and says, we know the border. We've been to the border. We've seen the border. And he says, you haven't been to the border. And she says, well, I haven't been to Europe either. I don't see what your point is. And he's like, my point is, why are you saying you went to the border? You've never been there. And so here's Trump said something today, though, which was hilarious. By the way, JD Vance, I like some things about JD Vance. He is terrible as a speaker. You watch him do his speeches and stuff. That was a very poor choice. Yes. He needs to learn how to speak. Like, he's a terrible speaker. But he said something hilarious today, which was they realized that Trump had called him and said he realized today that Kamala Harris is actually running as Trump. Like, every single position she has shifted to is actually Trump's position. She stole his no tips on taxes. She now is in favor of a border wall. She says she's going to build the wall. Are you kidding me? This is the same woman who 4 years ago is like quote after quote after quote about how awful the wall is. And part of her platform is now, I'm going to build the wall. I'm for fracking. We don't want EV vehicles. Like, she has literally taken every position that Trump has, and she's saying, these are my positions. She's actually running as Trump, it's crazy to think that. It's even crazier to think that people are dumb enough to fall for that. But I think a lot of people are.
I won't keep you much longer, but I mean, two things I want to ask you about. One is all these old neocon assistants coming out behind Harris. I don't understand how, if you're a liberal, that resonates with you. That Dick Cheney, George Bush, all of them. What's his face from McCain, dude? Like, are getting behind your candidate. Not go?
But those people aren't liberals. I'd say Bobby Kennedy is a liberal, right? I would say people like Brett Weinstein are liberals. These people are progressives, and neocons and neoliberals are the same animal.
Yeah.
So they sit in two different parties, but they're exactly the same people. They're the pro-war, warmongering chicken hawks who want to spend all your money, and they want to regulate everything so that they can game the system for themselves. They want to inside trade all the stocks on Wall Street, right? But they want to throw you in prison for having crypto. Like, these are that's who they are. And whether they're called neocons or neoliberals or that, they're one thing. And then what you have is you have a group of people that I would say are kind of traditional conservatives that are now called MAGA as a slur. They wear it with pride, but if you talk to anyone in Washington, that's a slur. And so you have those people. And then you have what I would say are kind of classical liberals, which are more libertarian and more like Kennedy or Tulsi Gabbard. And what you're finding is that now the coalitions that have formed is the neocons and neoliberals have become one party, and now the MAGA and classical liberals are becoming one party. Those two groups are coming together, not because they agree on everything, but what do they agree on? We don't want to be shut down. We don't want to wear masks on our faces for fake pandemics. We don't want our children to be injected with big pharma experimental drugs. We don't want to pay the kind of money we're paying for gasoline. So please, somebody drill something out of the ground. Stop force feeding us into all these preconceived structures. So I'd say the people who are coming out for Harris, of course they are, because Harris is nothing. She's literally nothing. She's not even actually a progressive. She's nothing. Yeah. She is a blank slate for deep state and for the bureaucratic state to get behind and to turn her into whatever they want her to be. And that's why they were willing to do it as opposed to Michelle Obama, because she is literally Biden was a corpse in office. She's like, I'll be your corpse. I don't have to have a thought. Just make me president. I want the power.
If you study Rome, that's exactly what, at the end of Rome, they install a teenager as the emperor, and he has no power. He just gets a per diem and a stipend, and that's it. And these outside foreigners were running the country. You know, I would tell you that Blinken probably runs the United States more than Joe Biden or Kamala Harris does. So the final thing is this, and I'll let you go, is the shadow banning, we discuss it all the time. I get shadow banned all the time. People tell me it's because I'm not good at what I do. I'll accept that if that's what you want. I've been doing it for 8 years, top 100 podcasts on comedy podcasts, but that's okay. I'll accept it. But I know we talked about Mark Zuckerberg, but it's like, how long can they control the truth, and how long can they continue down this road as they erode their own viewership? At what point do we switch it? And then I want to follow up with one more question to you, and I'll ask this real quick. When it used to be, there was 3 to 4 networks. Now it seems like we're starting to get back to that with Amazon, Netflix, Apple TV, and what's the other one? Oh, Disney.
Yep.
And even on the internet, we have it's like, good luck getting anyone to. I'm sure your reach on your social media is probably better than on your website. I could be wrong, but it's just getting people to just put it in your address bar and go over here seems like a momentous task. Do you think that we're getting away from all this, or do you think they're just solidifying us into a couple of small options?
No, I think they're absolutely solidifying us into a few small options. I guess this is actually a great question to end with, because it's kind of full circle from how we started, right? Which is 10 years ago, it wasn't like that. Like, people didn't know how powerful YouTube would become, or how powerful Facebook would become, the ability that people would have to communicate with each other. And so what's happened is those same behemoth companies, as they become behemoth companies, are being basically destroyed. They're being gutted. And turned into controlled information, controlled opposition. We're going to control what you say and how you say it, and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And by the way, to the shadow banning thing, like, anybody who denies shadow banning is out of their mind.
Out of their mind, dude.
You're out of your mind. You are literally in the matrix, right? Where you believe that really is a hamburger, right? You're just believing whatever they tell you. Shadow banning is not even hidden. One issue that I have with Elon Musk, you said at the beginning, like, you don't totally trust him. One thing I don't trust about Elon Musk is that I believe Musk should have revealed Twitter's algorithms. He should have laid them all out and said, here's what shadow banning is, and here's how it's used. He should have laid it out for people so that they could see it. And I think he should still do it, because I think he should be showing, this is what YouTube is doing. This is what Facebook, they have their own versions of it, but it's the same thing, right? And algorithmically, they are shutting down dissent. That's what it's all about. And so the idea that yes, we have a consolidation of power in those companies like Netflix and Amazon. And I had this conversation with someone the other day. They were asking me, they said, well, you're a free market guy, so how do you stop that? You can't even stop that. And I said, well, I think you can. Free market does not mean that you can allow one company to do whatever they want. Now, if you're a true hardcore, anarchist, libertarian, or libertarian, or anarcho-capitalist, you would say, yeah, everybody gets to do whatever they want, and it doesn't matter. But the reason that doesn't work is because none of these companies got to that size purely by market forces, right? Amazon is at its size because it gets government contracts, and it gets massive Pentagon contracts and Department of Defense. Facebook beat MySpace because the CIA put money into Facebook. They didn't beat Facebook because because MySpace sucked. They did it because they had this enormous infusion of cash that came from government sources to make them much more powerful and to grow much more rapidly, right? And so none of these companies that are the size they are legitimately that size because simply markets made them big. They're big because governments got behind them, because they were willing to put in backdoors and they're willing to work with them. That's why Durov got arrested in France the other day. He was talking about how the FBI came and visited him at Telegram and told him, we want you to put backdoors in Telegram. And he refused to do it. I'm not going to put backdoors in. We're not going to build them in. Separately, the FBI met with his engineers secretly and offered to pay them secretly.
So crazy.
Backdoors into Telegram, right? And so I think there is an answer to all of this. And I would hope that in the future, if there is a Trump administration that really wants to fix problems, this is a problem they should be tackling. And here would be the solution. The solution is, I think you use antitrust and you break up these companies. And you say, for instance, Amazon, you can be a company that sells goods and sends them all over the country as a commerce entity. Absolutely. You can't own newspapers. Sorry, you can't. You can't also own TV streaming. Sorry, you can't. If you say, well, that's not fair, I'm an American, I should be able to. Yeah, well, then you got to pick one. What do you want to do? What's your passion?
What if
Go
you
do-
name it something else? What if you would name it something else? It just can't be named Amazon. That's the thing.
No, not named Amazon. Amazon as a property, or you as the individual owner of Amazon cannot own these other things
Okay.
as well. Because what antitrust says, and so what somebody said to me is like, typically antitrust is you have too much control over one market, right? But what's happening now is that these companies aren't controlling one market; they're controlling multiple markets. So when you're controlling media, and you're controlling newspapers, and you're controlling Whole Foods, and you're controlling Amazon as an entity that's sending stuff out, and you're controlling AWS, so you control the back door to everybody's website practically in the country. 60% of the internet is built on Google and AWS, and I'm talking about the global internet. 60% is. When you're controlling that much infrastructure, you have to trust that that entity is benevolent, and they're not. The reason the government doesn't want to break up those entities isn't because the government is uncaring or says we believe in capitalism. It's because Jeff Bezos a long time ago made deals that said, yeah, I'll give you backdoors into AWS. Yeah, absolutely. Give me Pentagon contracts for $5 or $6 billion, and I'll allow you to have access to everyone's websites and to be able to crawl all of their information. And yeah, you want to have access to our facial recognition technology and our palm recognition technology in Amazon. We'll give that to the government if you give us subsidies and contracts for it. So the reason that these companies are the size they are isn't because these guys are masters of industry and captains of.
Yeah.
It's because they cut deals with government entities who are now extracting our freedoms and using them to do it. The United States has a strong history, especially in recent history, of saying we're not going to create laws to control the people. We're going to use corporations to do it. And corporations are going to be the vehicle by which we take away your rights. And that's, I think, the number one way any administration that wants to really represent the people can go in and say, we are going to change the function and relationship between government and corporate America.
I love it. I hope that we can get into people to do that. It just seems like the system is set up just with so much corruption, but it can start. I think we can fix it, especially on a state and local level, that we can fix it. We can control Washington from our little towns and our states.
I just want to say one thing, Ben. I'm optimistic about the future because we talked earlier about how, we had it great in 2015. But I remember in 2012, I was deeply involved with the Ron Paul campaign, and you were one of the few people with a real platform that gave him any kind of time on a regular basis. I mean, I remember the only time he would be mentioned, it would be like people like Dana Bash. I remember especially was one of the worst offenders in such a dismissive way. And I think if someone had a campaign like that today, because people like you now have platforms that they're, as Sam would say, their own pirate ships, that they might actually have a shot because we're not so dependent anymore on the cable networks and the, the mainstream news networks. And so you're one of the reasons I have a lot of optimism for the future. And we appreciated that so much at the time. I remember working in Nevada, in the phone banks there and just, seeing your reports as they came out. So I've wanted to say that for a long time. We really all appreciated that back then. And we continue to appreciate what you're doing.
I really appreciate that. And I will say that for me, Ron Paul was the biggest way that I woke up to what was going on in this country. And I agree with you that the Ron Paul revolution, right? While it didn't reach the point that it should have, I think its time will still come. I agree with you about that. I wish that in whatever iteration of what happens with Trump as he moves into this next phase, that he has said he's going to bring libertarians into his cabinet. He has said that he would do that. We'll see if he does. But wouldn't it be pretty amazing to bring someone like a Ron Paul in there and say, we're going to put you in charge of some stuff. And so my hope is this. My hope is that whether it's Ron Paul or Trump or JD Vance in the future, or whoever, right, that we have to create a plan to tear it all down. Tear it down. And so it's not drain the swamp, it's tear it down. Go in there and find all these corrupt systems, and you just have to gut these systems and break them apart and remove them. And I think that your country has a shot at that point. But until that happens, I don't think you do. You can't keep fixing this thing because this thing's not broken. This thing is designed to do what it's doing.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, Ben, we always love talking to you. You give us all hope. Thank you so much for coming on. One more time, tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, go to truthinmedia.com, or on X, you can find me at Ben Swann _. Same thing on Instagram, even though Instagram. And then on X also, truth_in media. You can see us there.
Ben,
And
thank you
Sabra.
so much.